Welcome to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are available in podcast form. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Email questions and comments are welcome. Hit us up at dj@ArtistFirst.com. And here they are, your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, D-Man. And we were having trouble hearing you, but I hope you're there. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And she's Margaret. And that's the end of the show. Thank you very much for listening. And tonight we're going to talk about rigidity for all you guys out there. We're actually going to talk about flexibility and rigidity, and really in the context of how people think, because I think I would postulate, Margaret, that what we're seeing in the modern era, and we talked a little bit about, we alluded to this a little bit about this in the show we did on social media, that there's a tremendous amount of ideology that is taking the place of what I would say, what would conventionally be called, thinking for yourself. Instead of basically coming to a conclusion based on your own evaluation of facts or your own evaluation of really the whole thought process of putting forward a theory about something. Say, well, I think it's this. Theory. People kind of dress these words up, right? They say, well, theories. Oh, that sounds so amazingly complicated. It's not. All it is that we all do this on an everyday basis. We figure out what we think is going on. We say, well, I think it's this. And if you do the next step, which is let's establish, the reality. Let's go investigate. Let's test our theory, right? And the way you test your theory is you actually go and find or try to establish the reality or the facts. So you have, this wonderful thing, your idea of what's going on. Scientists call it a theory. And then the actual facts, which scientists call, the investigation or the, the kind of gathering of data. When people say theory and data, they're already lost. But when you just say, I think this is going on, let's find out. You think, I think this is going on, let's find out. And then there's this wonderful step, which sometimes doesn't happen, and it's a very important step. You compare what you think was going on with the reality. And what wins there? It's not a hard question. Dun, 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 dun. Reality should win. and in the unfortunate sort of age of the interwebs, oftentimes reality is ignored.
Well, I think foundationally speaking, people, when they feel uncertain about something, they feel better if they get somebody to back them up. You and I agree. So okay, I feel better. Instead of kind of looking at it going, why do I feel this way, or why do I think this way? Because their uncertainty makes them believe that if I'm uncertain and unsure, then I could be wrong, and that's really bad if I'm wrong. So it's this sort of nebulous experience of layering one on top of the other, that, if I'm uncertain, then I may be, you get down to uncertain means that I'm bad. Like, no, just means you don't know. And that distinction, I find, is not really taught. It's not that being uncertain means that you're bad, and it's okay. That's the foundation of what the scientific method is supposed to be. There is no judgment attached to it. And people attach this judgment to it. That uncertainty triggers this self-judgment on yourself. You should know. It's like, well, how are you going to know if you don't look and then find out what may be? And it could be you may never know. That's another possibility. But that kind of broadness of allowing yourself to experience your world, to make room for that. The fact that not knowing is a natural state, believe it or not.
Well, I mean, let's back that up, because that's exactly correct. And I think the two things that are important in what you just said are that people equate not knowing with somehow being wrong, versus the you said scientific method, and I think that frightens people. But and you and I have had a lot of training in the sciences. But if you haven't, all that means is that you are willing to be. The scientific method says, let's find out. It's really just that. There's no such thing as uncertainty. Is only that you don't know yet, or that you haven't figured it out yet. And when you put the yet on there, people feel a little more comfortable. They say, well, yeah, okay, I'm in the process of trying to find out. So if somebody says to you, why do you know? The confident scientific answer is, I'm working on it, okay? Get out of my face. So that the answer of why don't you know is it's a process, and that I think what people don't like about the I don't know is they feel a little out of control, and instead of saying that I just don't know, and people sort of put a bad judgment on that. If you say I'm working on it, people say, oh well, working on it. It means there's something going on. You're trying to do it. So the idea of allowing yourself to be working on it, and what does working on it mean? That's the other part of what you said, which was wonderful, is that the scientific method, which frightens people, is only just, I think it could be this. That's called your theory. We don't have to put that word on it, but that's what it is. It's like, I think it could be this. And then the second part of the scientific method is, let's find out. And the third part is where people, I think, fall down, and that I mentioned that, but you were talking about it too, is that instead of allowing yourself to be working on it and allowing yourself to be in this kind of, well, I think it's this, and let's find out, they don't like this part, which is when I think it's this, but the facts or reality says I'm wrong, people get crazy. Oh, I was wrong. The lovely thing about the let's find out scientific method is you're allowed to be wrong as many times as you want, because the process is the important part.
Right.
And it's really an analog for life.
Right. No, it's understanding it's a process. And if you become emotional because suddenly you're wrong about it, then you have to stop yourself and really be quite honest. It's like, why am I upset about this?
I think you said it too, but I'll let you continue. I think people are taught that it's bad to be wrong.
Well, it's a discipline for oneself to become aware of, I'm actually feeling this, instead of feeling it and not knowing what to do with it. It's like, well, do I even have a name for what I'm feeling? And then if you don't have a name for what you're feeling, then you're really unhappy. Because you're just like, I'm feeling something and I can't figure it out.
Right.
Which is like two completely different places to be in. Feeling something and then figuring it out. It's just one's thinking and one's being. So it's like, okay, I need to stop and take stock of what's actually going on. Am I making myself crazy? Quite possible.
Quite possible.
And to understand that okay, that's okay. Let me stop. I can stop. I can put the brakes on. Believe it or not, you can put the brakes on, but you gotta wanna.
Yes, and I think part of why people get so triggered or so crazy about these things is that they don't know that they can put the brakes on, or they've never been taught that they can put the brakes on. They've been taught that to be unsure is bad, to be wrong is badder, and that if you're sure instantly, that somehow you're weak. Why don't you know?
That judgment, it seeps in, and you don't really need it. And that's the thing. It is taught by example more than anything. That if you're not sure, and someone comes on your case because, what do you mean you don't know? It's like, well, I don't know. And because the implication is that it's not okay to not know. Instead of being taught, it's all right not to know. Let's find out.
Let's find out. I think it's important to, especially in children, because children are naturally curious, and they're unashamed of not knowing. This is the natural state of children, and we lose that. We get taught that we should know all the time, and what you need to teach children as they become older and more mature is that they should be confidently curious and always willing to say three things: I don't know, let's find out, and once you think you've found out, be open. I'm still open to new information.
It's not judging every single step of the way.
Right.
Understanding that reality is quite broad. There are many things that we don't know, and it's all right. Because if you make that connection that not knowing is something to be anxious about, you're going to be anxious all your life.
Yes, quite.
Seriously, because there's so much out there that we just don't know, and it's okay. But if you think that even if it's a sublime thing, you're not voicing it, and you say, "Oh yeah, that's." But internally, find out if you've made that sort of sublime connection. That, gee, I'm wrong. Oh, that's bad. It's like, or gee, I'm not sure. I can't be certain. Oh, that's bad. It's like, take that in and understand that that's what you're doing to yourself, and you're doing to yourself constantly. You can almost begin by counting how many times you found yourself not sure, and then you're feeling bad. So you just count throughout the day how many times that happens. Oh my goodness!
And that's a good segue to the topic. We really didn't introduce it directly. The topic tonight is serial rigidity. Serial rigidity, which means rigidity that is sort of repeated, versus flexibility, versus true flexibility. And what you just said, that anxiety, let's call it anxiety about being unsure, can drive people two ways. If they move towards the, well, it's okay, and I can do the let's find out, if they've been taught that, it leads them to a much more healthy way of approaching reality and theory. But if it draws you, the fear or the anxiety draws you towards unwarranted confidence or ideology, which you mentioned earlier in the beginning. That you said, well, people are unsure, so they look for someone to back them up. What they're looking for is also known as groupthink, or as sort of I'm going to join this group, and we're going to regardless of facts. We don't need facts. We don't need let's find out. We know, with the quotes around the know, we know what is happening. We're absolutely confident that we have it right, and that everyone who joins our group has to think the same way, or there's a problem. And those types of answers, which are couched as absolutes, they can't stand the other part of the scientific method, which is that any answer has to be able to be challenged and proven in some regard. It has to have something backing it up, which is a fact, not
right. In other words, when you're in an ideology, you cannot be challenged. Right. And the scientific method, that is a baseline where you must check your results constantly.
Right. One of the things scientific method, again, gets people kind of crazy. But one of the things that you can always sort of draw that line between somebody who's willing to have their assumptions or their ideas challenged versus somebody who isn't is if you ask them, well, why? That one word, cleaves. If you ask somebody why and they respond with because or with the variations of this is an unchallengeable idea, you know that they're not dealing with a something which is based on reality and subject to change as new facts emerge because we don't know everything, versus something which is based on ideology, and it's really just you could think of it as a giant balloon of hot air that can't stand the pinprick, because real ideas that have been established through some sort of a let's find out path are able to stand pinpricks, and sometimes they collapse, but no one cares. They say, "Oh, we have a better idea that this one wasn't quite right. It's Newton versus Einstein, for argument's sake. Newton was as right as rain until Einstein came along, figuratively speaking. But Newton wouldn't have cared at all. He would have said, that's great. Wow, we now know something even better. And the let's find out I had is I love your new let's find out. That's that side. The other side of that, when you say why and they say never question, you can't question the program. You know you're dealing with something which is a balloon of theory backed up by theory, which really means nothing. It's backed up by air.
Right. And this is the training that the scientific method gives you, okay? But it's only one aspect of who you are, okay? The training is wonderful, and it allows you to be open to thought, as well as, if you really take it broadly, you understand that there are many things you just don't understand, and it's okay.
Expound on that, because I think that's what people also gets crazy about with the scientific method.
Well, I've run into so many people that they only want what can be proven. What is that? I'm from Missouri, or I'm from
Missouri.
No. It's there's a phrase.
Show me
the show me state. You've got to show me.
Yeah.
But
Arkansas, something. I don't know. Go on. Move on.
I apologize if I've gotten the state wrong. But what happens is when you live only and you've got to show me, everybody, you look at the person like, why is it falling to me to have to try to open up your hard head? I've had this happen before, and I look at them like, look, you got to make room for the fact that you don't know a lot of stuff.
I would put it this way. You take it. You see if you agree with this. That one of the essential components of the let's find out is the acceptance of mystery. Scientists can be dogmatic too.
Oh, you think?
Well, yes, and I know you're saying it, in tongue in cheek, but dogmatic science is a sort of a contradiction in terms. True science, true let's find out, always accepts the mystery. The mystery is that you are never going to be able to find out everything. That you always say, this is my best idea of what's happening as far as I know right now. And the mystery part is I hope somebody comes along and has a better idea. And you're so comfortable with that, it's assumed that even though you are really, really confident about what you think you know right now, that you're always willing to say, show me more.
And unless you are flexible in that to allow for the variability that is out there, and it can only be a certain way without any change, that is the definition of religious thinking.
Yes. I mean, dogma is often, doctrine and dogma have similar roots. You're looking at something which is supposed to be taken on faith. And here's what, before we get into trouble, I have no problem with taking things on faith, and no scientist or someone who accepts mystery should have a problem with that, because the basis of all things is that you can't know everything, and there are certain things which we can't prove, and we try to make them as few as possible in science and in life, but there are assumptions that you must make, and you have to take them on faith. And any scientist who says they don't take things on faith, they're not a good scientist. In fact, you should say you're not really a scientist, because there are many things that require that assumption. But if you don't allow for that, you're also not doing science. It really is still doctrine or dogma, or, as you said, religious thinking.
Well, dogma is religious following. Doctrine is sort of an outline of how this particular grouping functions.
Yeah, I think they're not identical in any way.
No,
in any
they
way,
are
shape,
not.
or form.
They're not. But the point being that it comes down to the way a person thinks about something or reacts to something. And the ones that are afraid because they don't know and are afraid because they don't know will cling to dogma, will cling to foundational. It's only this way. It can only be this way. And frankly, you are free to think that way if you want. But it makes for a small box that you're functioning in. There is no expansion of your experience in this life. And the whole thing about living here is being able to expand your boundaries in living.
And I think we do that through our openness versus our closedness.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about serial rigidity, and it's sort of, it's sort of implied in the word, is that things that are rigid are also things that are immutable, and they're also fragile in many ways. And if you can't stand on your own and you require a rigidity to support you, some sort of framework, when that framework collapses, because rigid frameworks can be collapsed, you will feel at sea, completely lost. And so those who, if you espouse something which is rigid and inflexible, and then something comes which threatens that, there's oftentimes a tremendous sort of emotional pushback. This idea that you yourself don't have the strength to say, I don't know, let's find out, I need rigidity, means that you also will react very badly to anything that challenges or possibly threatens this support. It becomes, instead of science and let's find out, is a very strong position, because you have to allow yourself the maturity to say, well, I could be wrong. Rigidity is a weak position that can be broken and then causes you to collapse. And therefore, when people are in a rigid position and they don't, they understand that, they react very badly to anything that could possibly crack through.
Well, that rigidity is building a construct, a mental construct that can be collapsed. For instance, because we're talking in broad terms, but before Christopher was sick, I always thought that, okay, I've got children, I'm fighting every day just to survive, raising the kids, getting things done, etc., just living. And I thought, okay, well, once the kids are all in school, I will have a breather. I'll be able to, maybe pursue something besides taking care of the family. And then he got sick. And in my rigid mindset, that's never supposed to happen. What do you mean he's got a disease that could kill him before I die? Children aren't supposed to die before their parents. What do you mean that he's got to be handled in this particular way? What? Wait. How can this be? What do you mean we don't have the science, enough science, or the research to understand what this is?
Exactly.
What do you mean that there's nothing to grasp? You guys don't have a clue, and we're the experiment in the corner because there isn't enough data. So there you are, standing there, going, oh, that construct is gone.
Yep.
We are completely at sea. There is nothing to stand on mentally or scientifically. It doesn't matter what you've done. And honestly, this is when I saw a lot of people trying to make bargains with God. God, hey, why'd you send this? Why don't you send it to me? Don't send it to my child. Every bargain under the sun. I'll do this if you'll let my son or daughter live. And it's like, listen, that gets you through the first few steps, and then you got to deal. Because what I saw being on the cancer ward was that there were a lot of parents there who just didn't want to deal and wanted to make this bargain to get out of having anything hurt them.
Exactly. And if you go back 2 sentences there, when we were placed into the we don't know category, all of a sudden, you are the experiment in the corner. You've reached the forefront of what you thought people knew, and you realize that there isn't something there. The surety, what's attractive about dogma is the surety, children never die before their parents. We know everything. We're a functioning modern society, and there's no disease on earth that can hurt. All these kind of, they're not lies, but they're
we have the right insurance. We're covered.
Right insurance. We have the cover. All these things are sort of props. They're sort of assumptions that are not based on anything. They're not based on reality. They're based on sort of an illusion, and we're all guilty of these illusions. The problem is when they're taken away, and you realize that those things were false. You're presented with that challenge of reality coming in. And it doesn't have to be quite as devastating as a cancer diagnosis. But if you haven't spent any time realizing that much of what you do is not necessarily grounded in fact, and sort of drilling down a little bit and challenging your assumptions, that can break people, and it does break people. And it becomes a deep and sometimes devastating challenge to their idea of who they thought they were. You said it. It's a mental construct. And the wonderful thing about mental constructs is they work as long as their foundations aren't kicked out from under them. When the foundations are kicked out, you have to actually deal with reality, and reality is a choppy sea. Reality does not have these firm kind of, oh yes, this is what happens, and then we have the right insurance, and we've got all the things, and we have the 401k, and none of that matters to reality. Reality is like, no. And it requires a certain internal strength and a certain being comfortable with the unknown. And something that people are not comfortable with in general is the unknown.
Well, it's a natural thing. And at this point, we've reached time for a bit of a break.
A bit of a break. So we're going to go into the unknown, and while you guys listen to some commercials, we'll be back.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Taking God on Patrol is a first-person account of the world of law enforcement from the perspective of a Christian police officer in the 4th largest city in America. From speeding car chases to the crossing of the thin blue line, author Mark S. Cariner seeks to find God's biblical truth in a behind-the-scenes look at law enforcement. And check out Mark's newest book, The Tactical Heart. Both are available at Amazon.com.
The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief, Dev, is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side, as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Let's get back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. That was 10 by 10. And we are back from the unknown. Ooh. And it was great. And tonight we're talking about really, 2 different types of thinking. And I want to make sure that we aren't really, making this dichotomy. People blend these types of thinking throughout their lives. And I think it's not something to be eschewed one way or the other. You don't have to prove everything. You mentioned last half hour, Margaret, that there are people who say, the show me state, whatever that is, Missouri, Arkansas, wherever it is. But this idea that there's a rigidity in saying I won't believe it unless you can show it to me, unless I can put my hands on it. There's a rigidity there too, and as we mentioned, true let's find out thinkers have to always be comfortable with the mystery. And if you're thrown into the unknown, we were just thrown into the unknown with Christopher, but we are all in many ways thrown into the unknown. You have to allow yourself the strength to say, I don't know, and that's okay. And I'm going to try and find out, but if I never find out, that's still okay. And before we get too far into our theories, I want to just talk a little bit. We're going to have a graphic going up, and this is from Uncle Albert, who's one of my faves, Albert Einstein. And it's a simple quote, as many of his were, but it's a good one. He said, we cannot solve our problems, and by that he meant all of our challenges in life and science. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And I love that, because the implication is oftentimes in science and in life, we create our own problems through our own thinking. And we have to be willing to say these horrible words, maybe I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible. I was never wrong.
The eternal 5-year-old speaks.
Yes. No, not wrong. But we all have the eternal 5-year-old within us somewhere. And it's important to, I think, have the eternal, we'll say the eternal 2-year-old, the curiosity and the let's find out and the unashamed kind of saying, I don't know, and rejecting anybody who says, well, you should know. Well, I don't know, and I'm going to try and find out. This flies in the face of this sort of dogmatic or ideological thinking, and in my mind, once you have learned to embrace that inner 2-year-old and not the inner 7-year-old or 5-year-old that says they have to be right all the time, if you learn to embrace that inner 2-year-old, you become much more comfortable with having your current concepts revolutionized. We mentioned last half hour that Newton thought he had it all figured out. Isaac Newton thought he had the whole world figured out. And in his current context of thinking, he did. His Principia, which was his treatise on how the universe worked from his point of view, was a masterpiece. But we now know that it was largely wrong. He wouldn't care. He'd be, this is great. And if we look at today's modern theory of quantum physics, we now know that a lot of what Uncle Albert thought was reality was wrong. And at one point in his later scientific career, Albert Einstein said, my greatest mistake, one of his greatest mistakes, was in not, in essence, embracing this idea of quantum physics. He rejected it with his famous quote, God does not play dice. Well, it turns out God does play dice, and God's pretty good at it.
Oh, if we go into that, it's a whole other arena.
Well, yeah, he meant the universe doesn't play dice, but of course the universe does play dice. We do know that probability, at least what we think right now, is probability rules, and yet that's uncomfortable for many people.
Well, it's part of this level world. There's different worlds.
Mm.
Okay, and that's part of the description of what this is. Science basically takes what it sees and it becomes a description, usually in equations, of what is happening out there. It is a 3D snapshot of, 4D snapshot of what's going on.
Yep.
And most people would say, hey, 4D snapshot, isn't that reality? It's like, well, that's a description of this world. but you're more than this world. There's more to who you are than the 4D.
Yes. And that idea scares people.
Yeah. People like to be able to say, well, I know what the world is. Yeah, to a degree. If you've had kids, you understand that they believe they know what the world is.
I think there's something very powerful there. The I know we always describe as sort of the ego talking, because it has this wonderful word in it, I. And being states are not knowing states. Being states kind of inherently embrace mystery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do. They do. It is part of the nature of who you are that is outside the box of thinking and logic. Completely sometimes outside the box of logic.
When we talk about quantum states, we talk about a being state, because the interesting thing about a quantum state is that it isn't determinate, nor does it need to be. And then when we crystallize, when we collapse a quantum state, and it becomes a 4D thing for that femtosecond that it does, or it's much smaller than that, it is no longer in a being state. It actually, interestingly enough, goes into the past. The collapsing of the being state creates the past. The being state is at the present, and the future, the unknown, is unknowable. And this is one of the reasons why people have problems with quantum physics and they have problems with the future, is because they're both unknowable. The instant of now is a being state. It's also one thing that is collapsing constantly into the past when you know what happened. But the interesting thing about knowing is always in the past.
Well, it's a simple understanding that you can't pinpoint where an electron is within the electron cloud, its location, and measure it at the same time.
Correct.
And that means that the minute you've pinpointed it, everything else dissipates.
Right. And that's an example which kind of gets people crazy, but in general, the state that we are in, if we are truly to talk about it, is always slightly behind the moment of now. Yet now exists, and now is important, because the only way we get from then to what's going to happen, the future, is through now. Now this is starting to sound a little bit like a Mel Brooks routine, but it's not. Although if anyone who's seen Spaceballs, but I digress. The point I'm trying to make is that our eternal 2-year-old understands, at least at a subconscious level, the idea of now. Now is when you do things so that mommy doesn't catch you. That's now to a 2-year-old. Now is the moment when they without any meditation, they do something. Could be anything, but there is no premeditation. It is an impulsive leap into the unknown with joy. That is basically the description of a 2-year-old or a quantum particle or us. We fool ourselves into believing we know what's going to happen. Number one, we don't. We fool ourselves into believing that if we've done all the right things, that nothing bad can happen to us. It can. And the true concept of now, which was really the state of enlightenment, or the state that you want to get to, Tolle talks about the power of now, is that it is a unknowable instant. You can't know now. You can just be now.
Well, the concept, I'm just going to go back a little bit. You said that you just don't want anything can happen, and you don't want it to be something bad, but it can happen. It's like, well, anything good can also happen. All right? It's not just the bad.
No, I don't mean to say that it's bad or good. Yeah.
But it's understanding that the mind breaks it down that way.
It does. It does, absolutely.
So if you're actually embracing mystery, you're understanding that, you know what, you just don't know what's around the corner.
And I think also the idea that people bandy this about all the time about manifestation. We manifest reality, each one of us, in our own little way, every instant of every second of your whole entire life. However, the idea that somehow this, has with 7 steps to whatever you can do, you can pull in yourself a Buick or something. No. This manifestation is really a realization of the being state, which you just said. Now means anything can happen, good or bad. And in now, we don't worry about what happened already because it's in the past and immutable. And we don't project that it's going to be bad or good in the future. We don't judge that. We just be that. We be it right now, with the only realization being that in being, anything is possible. We open ourselves to grace and possibility. We did this a lot. We said, as we mentioned many times before in the cancer wards, they're perfectly willing to fill your ears with all the bad news, everything that can happen. And we'd say, okay, that could happen, but it's not happening today or now, and they may be right, and they may not be right. This is the thing that you come to when you come to reality and realizing that they don't know either. That's an important revelation, that all this idea of what could happen and all the bad things is no more than their projection, no less valid than anyone else's in many ways.
Well, you're entering a different realm. If you're in the hospital, this is the world of the hospital, which is based on the science that they have available to try to help the patient become cured. But you've got to be able to make decisions for your child. And it's very difficult when you are the patient and you're an adult and you have to make decisions for you. Because a lot of the stuff that goes on, you can barely think. Either you're so exhausted, or if you're taking chemo, forget it. And you need to have help or an advocate. And as a parent for a child with cancer, you are automatically their advocate. So you need to train yourself to be able to make decisions and understand that you must take responsibility for every decision you make. It's a scary thing. This is the reason why I'm bringing it up. This is why the fear rises. This is why you start begging other people. Usually it's the doctors or other people there, make this decision for us. Tell us what we have to do to cure our child. And the truth of the matter is, it's you that's got to make the decision. So you have to be able to leave open the many possibilities that can be, good or bad. But making the decision is usually the very last thing any parent wants to make, because the different protocols have a myriad of side effects as well as outcomes.
Yeah, but yes, and I think what you learn, though, is that all the things that they tell you, which are just projections, you need to not let them steal your now, or your current moment, your current day, the life that you're living at the moment.
It depends on whether or not you are in contact with your heart or not, because you are going through emotions, many, many emotions, and you have to be able to ride that wave.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think what you learn very quickly, I think what all people in that situation learn quickly, if they're going to learn anything, is that it is a wave, that it is not, it's no more the reality that you thought it was than this surety that you had before, this sort of rigidity that we all kind of can fall into very easily, of the I knows, was exactly that, as a chimera. It was not true. It was not real. That below that is a sea of emotion, which is also it's not a distraction, but it is something which will push you and pull you and roll you through all the things. And below that is that stillness. It's the now. It's the, even though the emotions are roiling, even though all the assumptions, all these sort of rigidity assumptions that people make were incorrect, or certainly aren't helping me now, there is this moment that has to be lived and should be lived. And once you get there at that still point, yes, the emotions come, but they don't push you off of it. You've opened yourself to the possibility of anything, and you open yourself up also to the strength of that grace. It's something which you don't get. Well, you go ahead.
No, you have to believe that there's something much greater than you. Without that, you are just going to be still tossed about in your concepts and your emotions.
Exactly.
You've got to believe in something far greater. It's a faith in something far greater than yourself. And that is the only way you get through. Otherwise, you are eaten alive, especially on that floor.
Well, yes, and I mean, to come back to our theme a little bit, the rigidity of the I knows gets blown away, and that makes people crazy.
Yes. And
in your daily day-to-day life, I would say that we have to try and identify these I knows, these rigid sort of dogmatic thoughts that really don't. When something says, when somebody gives you something that is sort of this neat little tied up package, and if you say why, they get angry. You're dealing with something which doesn't have roots. It doesn't have a foundation. The key of why is really the key of this. Does this have a being state, or is this a mental construct? Once you're put into this life-shattering, earth-shattering kind of situation, the why, the reality, breaks these things all at once. That can be devastating, and people oftentimes collapse into a ball, into a heap because of it. So, in the initial sort of baby steps way of doing that is just when you're handed these concepts, or when you develop them yourself, don't be afraid to challenge them with a why, and then to do the next step, which is the let's find out. You will find yourself stronger for it, and when a devastating or a sort of a shattering comes into your life, because every one of us will get something, you'll have more tools. You'll have realized that the why is important, and the actual grounding of something into reality helps you. Another example. Oftentimes, and we've talked about this in many other shows, oftentimes people create stories. As something happens, you find a yellow piece of paper on your chair, And it's quite natural for people to create this whole story. Oh, that must be from George. He hates me, and he knows I hate to have people put yellow papers on my chair. And you make this whole story up about George and how much he's trying to out to get you with these yellow papers. Well, it sounds silly, but people do these things on a daily basis. They start to guide their lives by these stories that they make up. And the let's find out, the maybe it blew off and it has nothing to do with George. And then you see, and you kind of do this investigation in your head, and you get away from two things: the fantasy that George is out to get you, the emotion that comes roiling up. Well, George, I hate George, and George is always out to get me, and the sort of denial of reality of this I know state, which you feel more comfortable in because you can know something and just say, randomly yellow pieces of paper could fall out of the sky, and that shouldn't bother me. And that grounding is what gets you through a life-shattering experience where all your precepts are challenged, and sometimes all of them are blown away. And it gets you through the sea of emotion, and it gets you down to the being state of, sometimes
stuff happens.
Stuff just happens. And sometimes it happens to you, and you just have to deal with it as best as you can, because none of us are guaranteed life for any length of time, which what does that do? It can depress you, but it shouldn't. It should say, life is therefore precious. Every moment is precious. Don't waste it.
And life presents very unexpected things. And you can't project some kind of story or judgment on something like that. Real quick, this story came to mind. One of your mom's neighbors told me this. She had come home, and she had this bird that she usually has in a cage, some type of parrot, I think. And she couldn't find it. She saw that the cage was open. She couldn't find it. Ran through the house. She finds it in the toilet, dead.
Bleh.
So she's like, oh my, what happened? Did somebody drown my bird? Who got in my house? How was this bird dead? And I asked her, well, wait a minute, because I know in these types of houses, there's a window right next to the toilet, very similar to the arrangement that your mom has. I said, wait, was there a window there? Was it closed? She goes, yes, it was. I was like, he might have been trying to get out, and he flew directly into that window and broke his neck and fell into the toilet. And she thought about it. I said, oh, no, did someone come? So she went in to see if there was some type of a mark or something on the window. And pretty much that's what had happened. But I mean, weird? Yes.
Yes.
Strange stories? Absolutely. But what's your first reaction? Okay, what happened?
Bird murderers.
Who strangled my bird and put it in the toilet?
But it's so true, because we leap to this, we grab onto a theory, and then we make a whole story up about it and all the emotions, and instead you just had one dumb bird.
Yes, it took a while for her to get through the story and try to find out what was going on.
Well, reality is one dumb bird at a time. So, and you just have to come to grips with that and realize that with serial rigidity has bird murderers in your house, and flexibility says it could be just one dumb bird. And I'm Michael Lyons. I'm a dumb bird.
And I'm Margaret.
Smart bird.
Thank you for listening.